Wait, Ludo, why are you so angry? You've been playing League again. Okay, that makes sense. But why does that make sense? All multiplayer games have their toxic players, but nothing compares to the levels of salt found in MOBAs. But unfortunately, even with so many measures being put in place to try and mitigate all of this, they will forever be toxic due to their core designs. So let's dig into exactly why. Welcome to Design Delve. So before we dive in, we first need to realise that MOBAs are a really complex genre, regardless of how popular they are. With over 3 million active players across the 2 of the top 5 games, there still may be some people who are unfamiliar with the genre, and to understand why this genre is so inherently toxic, we first need to understand how to play. So to do this relatively quickly, a MOBA is a multiplayer online battle arena. 2 teams of 5 players progress down 3 distinct lanes, which have defensive towers on either side. The players then battle to gain control of these lanes, killing opposing minions and players to directly attack their towers. And killing enough of these, teams can gain access to the opposing team's core, and killing this ends the game. Now this is a very simplified version of how a MOBA works. Matches are these swings of power and critical decision making that take place all over the map simultaneously, and this is one of the many reasons they're so engaging and popular. But the question is, what makes MOBAs so much more toxic than other multiplayer games? Because yeah, toxic players exist everywhere. There's always bad apples in whatever community you go to. Even competitive knitting has its dickheads, but MOBAs are infamous for their flaming. In an unofficial survey, a staggering 94% of players have claimed to have been flamed in-game, and a ridiculous 79% of players have claimed to have been harassed after the game itself. But why is this? Well, the problem begins with MOBA's core design. From League of Legends, Dota 2, Pokemon Unite, Smite or Heroes of the Storm, these games are all very different from one another, with their own unique characters and objectives, but they all share some specific design traits inherent to the genre itself, namely laning. The problem with laning specifically is that all the players on your team are reliant on one another, but at their most critical moments are playing completely alone. Excluding bottom lane, which commonly has 2 players on each side, each player in top lane, middle lane and jungle for the first 15 minutes are effectively playing a solo game. And this first 15 minutes is the most impactful time period in any match because of the game's stat permanence. When you kill enemy minions or players, you gain golden experience to accrue power and level up, but this also means that if you die to your enemy, you are feeding them permanent power. This is a reinforcement loop for either side. If you're stomping your enemy, it then becomes easier to do so, and if you're getting stomped, the game gets harder. Frustration and therefore toxicity comes from not being able to help struggling players without feeding more resources to your enemies in your own lane, having to just watch your team as your overall power potential slips away with nothing you can do about it. This kind of specific frustration doesn't exist in other multiplayer games. From Valorant to the finals, if one player is struggling, it's natural to divert resources to focus and help them. Your pleb friend Tim is running it down, you can follow them to back them up, adjusting your team's composition to better fit their skill level, but not so much with MOBAs. Champion choice and stats are permanent, positioning is rigid, and yes, there is room for junglers, mid and supports to venture off and gank other lanes, but if this fails as well, the issue just compounds on itself. Each action you perform in a MOBA has a very real and permanent consequence, and that extends to the rest of your teammates. All of this makes it incredibly easy and a lot more likely for players to start to point their grubby little fingers. Simply through the stat board alone, you can pinpoint a reason for why your team might feasibly be losing, whether that one person is to blame or not, and this blame game is exacerbated by how long these matches take. The average game length in a lot of multiplayer PvP games can be between 5 to 10 minutes, but in League of Legends, the average game time is close to 30 to 45 minutes, if not longer. I once had a Dota 2 match that lasted for 3 hours. Yeah, we won by the way, but this just gives toxic players something to latch onto. Seeing the early warning signs of a loss because of someone else's actions, the flash forward nightmare of seeing the snowball that is the enemy top laner coming directly for your booty can turn even the most wholesome of supports into whiny little twats. And yes, there usually are surrender systems in place to end matches early if it's too one-sided, but this can also lead to more toxicity, because they require a majority vote to go through, increasing the chances of this finger pointing and players holding games hostage by not voting if they're salty enough. To easily frustrated players, all of this can make the game feel as if the mere act of playing is a waste of time because there is no possible way you can come back after such a disastrous early game. But is this true? Well, no. There are a whole host of catch-up mechanics built into the genre with optional objectives, but easily frustrated players only look at the theoretical negative macro because of their micro brains. Speaking of objectives, because of the reinforcement loop nature of laning, objectives have been put in place to allow players to catch up, like Dragons or Baron. But because these are so valuable, the teams need to coordinate on capturing these objectives together. This requires a leader of sorts to tell their team where to go and what objectives to push to ensure victory. The game forces this kind of communication to see success, which I think is fantastic. We want our players to communicate and engage with one another, but now add anonymous users and an open party chat to friends and foes? It's a petri dish, but when you zoom in, it's just some dude saying, "Your mum, fat bum, wide tum," which is poetic, but vile. There are so many avenues for analysis where players can attempt to figure out why they're losing, who's not pulling their weight because they understandably don't know what to do, which comes to another core issue with MOBAs, which is their difficulty curve. Yeah, I agree. MOBAs are probably the most difficult genre to master. Scrap that, even begin playing. Having to learn map awareness, last hitting, wave management, denying, objective timing, jungling, simply understanding how the 55,000 characters work, their match of strengths and weaknesses, all of this to just play at a basic level. I have thousands of hours of play split between Dota 2 and League of Legends, and I still barely know my meepos from my teamos. All of that combined with a complete lack of tutorialization that teaches more than walk down this lane, good luck, makes for an experience that requires you to already have a friend who is seasoned in the game to even begin playing. 71% of players who were introduced to League of Legends were introduced by a friend, and that speaks volumes. Because of this difficulty curve and terrible new player experience, there will nearly always be a person in your games who is new, or at least new to their character, which just gives toxic players an easy target to point their grubby little fingers at. The helplessness of forced positioning and negative reinforcement loops of laning, the necessity for a leader in an anonymous culture, and the insane difficulty curve leads to a toxic player's paradise where they feel justified in their toxicity due to the inherent designs of the genre itself. And I am in no way advocating for the removal of these designs. The permanence of stats, laning, high stakes objectives and forced teamwork is what makes the MOBA genre so unique and popular, but it emboldens toxic players, which is just why the genre will unfortunately forever be toxic. Just mute the twats and enjoy yourself. But what do you think? Can you think of any other designs from different games that lead to toxic PvP behaviour, and can that be helped? Let me know down below, because I would love to discuss this with you. Right, what should we have for tea tonight then, Ludes? No, we're not having Wagamama again. We don't have the money for that. Not unless you guys go to Patreon to support us and Ludo so we can get those bao buns. I'm kind of joking, but seriously, thank you so much, guys. Alright, see you next week, pimps!